counter.
But no, I feel
It feels very
Hello and welcome to the Unwanted Opinion podcast, the show in which me and my friends give our unwanted opinion on all things film. My name is Lewis and I'm joined today with Kyle.
Hello.
Hello, and Gonzalo.
Hey.
Hey, how you guys doing?
Pretty good, actually, yeah?
Yeah, good.
Pretty
Sunny
happy?
day.
Yeah, pretty happy, pretty chipper after last night. I'm surprised, Gonzalo. You sound pretty down on the phone.
Yeah. I'm still processing this film. We'll get to it,
yeah.
but I'm still
We'll get to
digesting it. Yeah.
Yes, because on today's episode, we are, of course, talking about Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's new big 3.5-hour epic. So this will be a spoiler-free and spoiler-filled review of Killers of the Flower Moon. So, for the first half, of course, if you haven't seen the film and you want to know a bit about it, you want to hear our opinions of it, please listen in till about halfway through. I will give timecodes below to tell you when we will be talking about spoilers. Right.
Yes.
So, let's get right into the meat and potatoes of this. So of course, Killers of the Flower Moon was adapted from the non-fiction novel by David Gran, so this is a true story, and then this film, which of course was written and directed by Martin Scorsese, as well as written by Eric Roth, who's actually most famously known for writing Forrest Gump of all films, which is quite shocking when you watch something like
They
this.
are very different films.
Very, very different films, yeah. So, Killers of the Flower Moon opens in 1897 with this Native American tribe, the Osage, grieving over the loss of their natural way of life. Their community is being assimilated by white industrial America and have now been given a small, barren area of land in Oklahoma in which to settle. However, what was deemed worthless by the US government is anything but that, because oil is soon struck. The Osage are now the richest people in America. Not just the richest people in America, but the richest people in the world. And now we jump to 1918, with now their expanded town. They have fast cars, they have big houses, they even have actual footage of Osage owning planes and flying them about. And they are now lay pre-evil to the avenues which they could never anticipated. And with the news of such wealth, Ernest Buckhart, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, soon arrives, returning from the First World War and looking to find work with his uncle William Hale, who's played by Robert De Niro, who's a wealthy rancher and he's a beloved member of the Osage community. And then he quickly does find a job with Molly Kyle, who's played by Lily Gladstone, who's one of the wealthiest Osage members. And with everything now in place, William Hale will now initiate a plan of unspeakable horror. So, that is the plot of Killers of the Flower Moon. And actually, Gonzalo, because I actually don't really know much of what you think about this film, I'm going to jump to you and ask for your quick overall thoughts.
Okay, so without spoiling anything, I went into this movie without knowing pretty much anything about it. I talked to you about this movie before it was coming out, because I think we did a specific episode talking about certain topics that this film touches upon, and we discussed a little bit about that. But even though you did highly recommend the book, I did not read it before this film came out. And when the trailers were coming out, I purposefully avoided them because I knew I was going to watch this movie regardless. It was a thing review we were doing on the show. So I was like, I'm just going to avoid the trailers and go in completely blind. Which is not a very common thing I do. And I am kind of glad I did. This is a very, very, very weird film in my eyes, just because it tackles a very turbulent kind of moment in history. It tackles something that really happened, and it does so in a very both very objective and human way. It doesn't present clear lines of good and evil and like a hero versus antagonist. It doesn't really simplify the story. It seems to tell it in a very raw and real way. It jumps around in time less to like facilitate a specific narrative and more to get you to understand the times, the things that were happening, the peoples, everything that was going through these characters' minds that aren't really characters and are written and played a lot more like real human beings with flaws and mistakes and contradictions. And it is It is honestly, as someone who wants to be a filmmaker, I am quite jealous of Martin Scorsese for managing to do something like this. Thanks to last episode, I did watch a bunch of his movies and caught up a bit on like his filmmaking so far. Wow. Fucking hell. This is quite the jump. I am very impressed, very jealous. I will say if you're planning on like going to your niece's birthday afterwards, maybe watch something a little lighter. But if you have time to like, sit with it and digest it, and you're okay with like feeling feelings, then yeah, this is a very good recommendation for a movie. Yeah, 100%.
All right. Okay. Well, Kel, what about you?
Yeah. I'm right. Yeah. So I enjoyed it as a film. I thought, like I said,
Yeah.
I really love seeing sets, and this made me happy.
The production the productions.
There was so much green screen, man. It was all shot in the volume. Did you know that?
Yeah. Oh, shut up! I think Martin Scorsese would spit on you if he said that. No, and I like an actual kind of filmmaking standpoint. It is just unbelievable. Like Scorsese, like once again, just kind of brings filmmaking into the center, like being able to kind of like handle these giant sets,
thousands of extras at points.
I was just kind of thinking, it kind of reminded me of like those kind of massive party scenes from Wolf of Wall Street, where there's so many extras in the background that all seem to be doing their task perfectly, and then I kind of think you're like, because there's always some kind of scenes where there's one where there's a kind of a race happening on the street and everybody's out kind of like cheering, and I'm like, how do you do that? Like, how do you direct?
I'm like, no, seriously, somebody tell me. Old-fashioned war movies, like where you have like thousands of extras all dressed up and lined up to like recreate a Napoleonic fight or some shit like that. Like, it was so huge and big and like
I think
chaotic, but organized.
Do that well, especially like Ryan. But one thing that for me really stood out is the performances, which I won't say much of because I think you'll want to talk about them more. But
we'll get to it.
I have to say, I've loved seeing Leonardo DiCaprio look so depressed for a film. It was a nice change of pace.
He looks horrible.
He does.
He looks horrible.
He doesn't look like himself. It genuinely is.
No. He has this grimace that's just always on. He's always got his frown.
It's so interesting. But for me, my kind of issue was that I didn't know much going into this film. I would have known even less if somebody else had said something the day before I saw this film.
Sorry.
Lewis,
well, no, because the trailers. I thought you'd seen the trailers, and the trailers.
No, I didn't.
They pretty much tell you who's the bad people from the get-go.
I genuinely didn't pay attention to the trailers because I also kind of got confused because when you're like, oh, it's a book, and I looked at the book, and the book specifically talks about it being like the origins of the FBI.
The birth of the FBI.
So I thought this film was going to be completely different to what it was because. And because I was a bit confused when you told me how they changed it, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is what
script,
I was going to think what it was. But yeah, you have to kind of be invested. I think seeing it in the daytime may help if you're already slightly tired at night and you go in for 3.5 hours. My initial reaction, which Lewis will say, wasn't overly positive, but I have taken more time and I've had a nap since then. I've looked back I look on it.
It's not a film you can just. It's not a film you can just instantly react to. It is one that you are left with, and you have to sort of sit with and digest for a while.
The more I think about it, the more I enjoy it. Like it's that initial sitting there going, "Did I enjoy 3.5 hours of this?" Like it almost like it was too much to calculate.
It is a lot. Oh, of course, it's dense. It's very dense.
And the thing is, because it was very polar opposites. As we jumped to you, Lewis, you were sitting beside me, and you were like very emotional for it in the sense of just.
The thing is, right? So I'll jump into here. So me and Kyle actually saw this with like 10 other people.
It was a
whole squad of us went. It was a big group that I'd managed to wrangle into somehow watching a 3.5 hour film on a Friday night.
Those people are not going to watch films with you ever again, are they?
No, because they all enjoyed it, which I actually came out quite surprised by. That everyone did enjoy it so much. I was next to my friend Aaron, and me and Aaron had both read the book, so we kind of both gave each other looks when certain characters showed up and whatnot. And then obviously, I will say this: it's the book. It's a very, very faithful adaptation. I mean, it should be because it's a true story, but it's a very, very faithful to adapting the book. And I obviously. I've not been subtle about this. This has been my most anticipated film of the year, and for me, it absolutely lived up to my expectations. It's kind of exactly what I wanted it to be. It was a proper, sophisticated production. Scorsese, masterfully with his team. He has all his team with him. He has Thelma Schoonmaker, who's been making films with for like 50 years. Robert De Niro, of course, and obviously Leo DiCaprio, who's like 21st century muse. Yeah. All of them together, and. I was really blown away and very moved by it. I think it is just an absolutely profound epic, and I've said this in my written review as well, is that what you're really getting into here, what you're looking at this is a study of evil. That's what this film is. You're literally looking into the heart of evil and how banal and normalised it is when you're in the presence of it. How ordinary things are. And I think this is also a testament to Thelma Schoonmaker, the editor, is how they go from scenes like characters just talking jovially, like Robert De Niro earlier in the film is just talking to DiCaprio and just says, oh yeah, they're sickly people, and then it just cuts to Native American being poisoned just on the floor, struggling to breathe. And they have all the scenes of violence as well. Is just they're just like, it just cuts to it, and it's not stylized in any way. It's like a wide shot. There is just blocking, and it's just brutal, and it's horrible. And there's one specifically towards the end where they kind of go back and tell you that they recount a murder that is fucking disgusting. And I had my friend Jesus as well to the left of me too. And he was really struggling to watch it, actually. He was really, really struggling to watch it. And he came out a really depressed man, actually, because of the subject matter you're dealing with here.
Which is quite shocking, surprising.
Yeah. I was very surprised there.
I have to say, it's one of those films that isn't gory, doesn't really reminisce and involved itself in the guts and the blood and anything, but still feels
there's a couple,
but it feels cold and distant, and that makes it more shocking and more stomach churning. I've seen movies where people get ripped in half, and they didn't shock me as much as any of the deaths in this film do, because they make them feel human. It reminds me a lot of watching Pan's Labyrinth and seeing that moment where the general smashes a man's head in with a bottle. That is the kind of feeling that I get whenever something like that happens in the movie.
Do you know what's interesting for me? So this is something I went off and researched afterwards, because I was kind of confused by the scene. And this is what I find was more inhumane about how the Osage or the Native Americans themselves were taught, kind of taken out. The scenes where the Osage have to go to the bank and basically justify why they should have their money.
Yes.
Because
their money. Because they have guardians. I
did research into this, and it's like, because they weren't seen as people, they didn't seem like they were intelligent enough to handle their own cash,
their own money.
And I'm like,
so they had to get white guardianship to look after their finances.
Which I know everything else was horrific as well, but for me that was like when I kind of caught onto that, I was like, why is Molly having to
say, because the first time you see her talking about the money and stuff, you assume that it's because her mother is sick, so she has to justify where she's sick. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's their accountant. His concern about the movements of the mother because she's ill. Maybe there's something going on. But then as it goes on and you see her doing that again and again, you realize, oh no, it's because even though they are supposed to be owning this much money, they're never really in control of it. And that's kind of like a whole message to the fucking movie. You see these people who clearly are supposed to be in charge, supposedly have the power and the wealth, but then don't have any of it.
I have one question, and I don't know if Lewis, you can answer it because you've done more of the reading of it. Is the reason, because obviously, their wealth is family in the world, or one of the wealthiest people in the world. Yeah. But obviously, their livelihood, Molly's house, is her mother's sleeping in a bed that's right beside the front door Was that more of a Native American? Was that them kind of not?
I think that was more of just a family. Yeah, like obviously they have big houses, and so it just doesn't need to do that. But I think that's just a thing they do, a family thing. And
I would say,
that's interesting. The mother by the bed by the door is interesting.
Yeah.
I think that was quite purposeful. Because I think she has such distrust of where she is that she feels like she needs to be like close to the front door in case there's intruders or whatnot. I think that was quite purposeful.
One scene with her in the longhouse is like is fucking amazing. Sorry, I just remember that. Don't want to get into it, but that was brilliant. That was so brilliant.
But let's get into the performances.
Yes,
you, Gonzalo, I want to bring to you what your thoughts on Lily Gladstone as Molly.
Fucking incredible, unbelievable. One of the best performances I've seen in a long time. God, this reminds me so much of oh my god, the protagonist in Nope. The idea of this very quiet and reserved character that has so much fucking shit going on. Like, she is brilliant. She says so little throughout the entire film. She has so little dialogue compared to other characters, and yet she says so fucking much. It's, oh my god, she is absolutely spectacular. If she doesn't get a nomination for Best Actress this year, I don't know.
She will.
I have no idea what the fuck is wrong with the world, honestly. She is incredible.
She was fantastic.
She was fantastic. No, she I just can't. It was amazing. Sorry.
You can't speak.
He is gone.
No, I agree, Gonzalo. I mean, I was really blown up because, like you're saying, a lot of the time she's out of action. You know, she is sickly for a lot of the film, and
the diabetes.
Just the diabetes.
The diabetes.
And just like you're saying, there is.
Yeah.
It sort of reminded me of Anna Paquin's performance in The Irishman, although her performance is much, much less than something like Lily Gladstone's. But that sort of sense of that character kind of doesn't have to say much, but her eyes tell you everything.
Yes.
And she understands what's actually going on where other characters don't. And that's something that isn't obviously brought until near the end, but she does, and I think there's so much given in her performance, especially in her eyes, in that there's moments where she's just watching things going on, especially later on in the film, where she starts to see things. And I think so much of that, her work is just done purely through her face and her 100%. Eyes, and I loved her performance. I would say it was brilliant, especially because she was about to give up acting before.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, I saw that.
This film. Yeah.
Whoa,
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank God, because we would have lost one hell of an actress. Holy shit.
Yeah, she said she was like, she applied for some data analytics course and then got a call back to Martin Scorsese.
Oh my God.
Hello, Gmail from Martin Scorsese. Hey, you want to come back?
I mean, whoever cast her, that was 10 out of 10 casting, honestly.
Yeah,
no,
it
but
was.
I do love how even the writing of the film primes you to view her in that way, because right at the beginning, as we're introduced to the Osage people through the lens of Leonardo DiCaprio's character, you are told about how, you know, they are people that don't speak too much, so don't say anything unless you really have something to say.
Don't talk. Don't talk.
Yeah. Like the Blackbird talk,
which he does a lot
of. Yeah.
So we'll get to DiCaprio right now, actually, because that's funny. Because obviously, he's. I said this in my review as well. I think he has the most challenging role, right?
Yeah.
Especially, I think, of his entire career, because I say he's not playing like a hero or like a big villain, like Candy and Django, or like Jordan Belfort, who has, big charismatic persona, big kind of showy sort of performance, and he's playing an idiot. He's playing a moron.
He's playing
who's simple,
stupid, fucked up,
idiotic, and spineless.
Yep.
Spineless man.
Yep.
And it's one that you think, when you're at the statue or something like Leonardo DiCaprio, usually, you get to that diva status.
I wouldn't have cast Leonardo DiCaprio for this in a million years. But I'm glad they did. He does a really good job.
But
honestly.
he is, he's in most of the film for the entire 3.5 runtime. And I said this, it's his most challenging one, but he lives up to that challenge. I think it's his most complex performance and probably his best performance. I can't think of one. Obviously, John Belfort just jumps out to you just because of how flashy that performance is. But I think Ernest is his most interestingly nuanced character.
Yes.
But also, I think his greatest performance that he's put to screen.
We talked last week about Martin Scorsese's,
his main characters are never just good guys. They're never good people.
I think this is one of the best examples of it because, as someone who had no idea what the plot of this movie would be, I just got presented to a man. And throughout the beginning of the movie, I started to learn what kind of person he was.
Yes.
And I think the movie does an incredible job at showcasing it without damning him completely, without like routing him out as like a up until the end, like.
Right. Okay.
That's what I mean. Like it throughout the.
We'll talk about more when we get spoilers for sure.
Throughout the film, there's so many moments where it feels. It seems like he has an opportunity, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
So many moments.
But he's too weak.
But he doesn't. So and again, I will bring it back to what I said, and I love you, Guillermo del Toro, but I did not like Nightmare Alley, and I did not like the way the protagonist worked in that one, and I was very frustrated throughout the movie, thinking, why are you keep making these horrible wrong choices? But somehow, with this story, I kind of understand it, because from the very start, you are shown this man who is clearly not as intelligent as he portrays himself to be, who is incredibly insecure about that intelligence, and who is very much at the mercy of someone else. From the very get-go, I love that scene at the beginning where he first meets Molly, and they sit down, and she asks him if he's scared of his uncle, and he very quickly says no. And it is so fucking obvious that he is terrified of him, and I think it's a fantastic portrayal of a spineless little weasel who could have had happiness and just couldn't handle it. It's really good. It's honestly really really good, and it's
I like that scene I like that scene as well when someone asks him if he's nervous and he goes, "I ain't got no nerves."
Yes,
like, well,
yes,
yeah, you do.
Yes. It's so subtle and yet so fucking overwhelmingly obvious. It's fantastic. I really did enjoy that. Yeah,
and I think it was a really bold move, right? Because in the book and in the making of Scorsese talked about this is because in the original script they took it even more from the book, where the book is pretty much a lot of it is given you from the files of Tom White, who's the FBI agent played by Jesse Plemons, and his reports and what went down. It was from his perspective because that's where all the information is. And they mentioned, because it was just going to be a whodunit, it was going to be going from Tom White's perspective, going in and trying to find out who's causing these murders.
So easily.
Right? Yeah. And they did that script, and then he gave Leo the script, and him and Eric Roth all read the script together. And Leo went, "There's no heart in this story. Where's the soul? I'm not feeling it." And then so over COVID, they, like Martin Scorsese said, he tore it inside out. He went, "Right, why don't we do this from a different perspective?" And he went, "Who's the character we know the least about?"
Yeah.
And when they knew the least about Ernest, there's the least documented on that man. So they chose him to then be the lead and then go from the inside out.
I honestly think that was a brilliant choice. I had no idea that was how this went about, but it feels like it, because throughout the film, I asked myself a lot, hey, wouldn't it have been easier if you just told the story this way? Wouldn't it have been better if you did this and that? But it totally would have just made it another film. Another run-of-the-mill film. You could have made it like a thriller where you're not sure. You tell it from her point of view, and you're not sure whether this is happening or not until the end when everything is revealed. Honestly, it took fucking balls to do it the way they did. It takes guts to present the facts and very slowly tell you what is really going on as it unfolds. Keep some things in the dark, keep other things completely in the light, and keep you kind of guessing to whether this man loves his wife or not. And that's never really completely said yes or no to, and I really like that.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. I will get into that as well. Kyle, what about you on Leo? What did you think of him?
Like I just quickly said at the start, I was just so captivated about how depressed he looked, in the sense that I think that was the kind of, I think it's the kind of part what you're saying where he's kind of consciously aware of his lack of intelligence and he's kind of upset on that. The kind of not being controlled by his uncle, which I don't know if I missed the point that his middle name's King. Yeah. Because I thought when he's like, you can call me King or Uncle, and I was like, that's pretty presumptuous of you, mate. Like, calm down.
Yeah. It took me a while, but I just thought it was like a way of presenting the character as someone who views themselves as like the outmost authority, which fucking matches the character anyways, you know?
Yes, exactly.
I think there's like definitely parts of the film where there's a running theme of people getting people to get people to do something. And,
yes.
You know, how Leo was always
avoid responsibility,
So Leo was always the middleman, and there's almost times where he kind of doesn't like that. He was like, why are you asking me to ask somebody to ask somebody to ask somebody?
Yeah.
And, he wants to be the one who's making the decisions, and he tries. But he's not very good at it.
And he does try, and he messes up. And there's some scenes
he messes things up. Yeah.
He does look like a toddler, and it's like their dad took into trouble, and it's like this idiot left the tap on. Like, what a fool! And I'm just, and then he's sitting there going, I'm sorry. It's so,
it was a little sad.
It's so interesting, especially since because he has a brother in the film that's a bit closer to King.
Yes.
And there's also that kind of idea, Byron, that's his name. And there's that kind of idea that because obviously Byron's given off a wee bit more intelligence, and that because he's a wee bit more.
He's quieter, isn't he? He doesn't speak
quieter.
as much.
He's on the inside of King, and I think there's some times with Leo that they're like he doesn't like that.
But we kind of get that a lot through the movie. Like, the people who are the quietest are clearly the ones who are more in control. And, like, speech is very much used as, like, a performative thing. Because, like, King uses it a lot, but clearly he knows exactly what he's doing whenever he says anything. Whereas, Leo's character clearly just uses it to cover up his lack of anything to say.
Like, a lot of the kind of time that Ernest only ever feels in control is when he's dealing with his family.
Yeah.
Because that's his kind of responsibility. But there's a lot more to kind of discuss, but I can't really say anything without being spoiler.
It's so hard.
I guess we'll jump to De Niro, right? Because De Niro is one that, obviously when all the critics' reviews and all the buzz was coming out about it, especially after Cannes and then when the film premiered, all the buzz was about Leo and Lily Gladstone, and rightfully so. But when I came out, the one I was most taken aback by was De Niro, right?
Yeah.
And it's because, right, see when you get to the stature of like De Niro, you enter a new phase of your acting career, right? Because obviously when you're starting out, you can sort of do anything, no one knows who you are. And then you can show and show off your talents, you get given roles, and then, oh wow, that guy's a real talent, he's a real star. But De Niro obviously, over the years, has picked some pretty poor projects, and only really tries when he's doing something with Martin Scorsese anymore. But De Niro really blew me away, actually, because he just disappeared from me.
I was going to say...
he really was, and I think he's one of the best villains put to film in a long, long time. And there's a reason for that, because when I was thinking about, iconic villains, of course you got your big ones, your Hannibal Lecters, your Jokers, your Darth Vaders, yada, 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 right? But I really felt the weight of his villainy in this film. I really felt how disgusted I was by this man. And it really set me back.
This man was a real person, and it shows with his actions and the way he conducts himself and stuff. Like, this is the kind of horrible shit only like a real person could do. And
it's just...
It's fantastic.
And just like
it's a fantastic performance, especially as someone who had no fucking idea who he was or what his role was going to be in the story coming in. He was just this sort of like overly controlling, menacing presence who
one step ahead of every single person.
And as much like
when things
as
go wrong,
things went
he has
along,
another plan for it.
As things went along, you started to realize that he was way more in control and way more like than you would expect, you know, like way more on top of things. I will say, I also think he disappears into this character. He's got a very recognizable face and all that, but the way he conducts himself and the way he completely blends into the character. He is no longer Robert De Niro doing a Robert De Niro thing. No, he's just King. That's him. And I did like his, and I will say, like, his choice of, like, they both have that familiarity with each other, like, you know, with, like, DiCaprio, he has his constant frown kind of thing, but De Niro kind of mimics that a lot whenever he's, like, thinking or insecure about something and stuff like that, coming out of the jaw kind of thing. They both do that. It really does bring them, like, together as people, and like puts you into, like, oh, this is like their family. They're like the same kind of person, links them a little bit thematically and stuff. It's just like a lot of really fucking good choices from his part. I think he did a great job.
Like Gladstone, a lot of it is his eyes as well. Like you know when he's plotting something, when he's got something planned, and there's this great bit as well when they're in his house, King's house, and him and DiCaprio are, well, King is not DiCaprio. He's not smart. He's thinking about doing away with someone, right?
Yeah.
And then he's about to go into like his back room or something, or his living room, and he does this tilt of his head, and he has this sort of frown, and he just gives that gesture to DiCaprio that is just so unnerving. I don't know if you guys know the scene I'm talking about, but he just does that little head tilt thing and then walks into the room as if
it's like
it's time. And I'm like,
every single killing, every single thing that he does that causes suffering in others is just like this shrug of, like, you know, must be done what must be done.
And he believes what he's doing is justified. He believes he's innocent in what he's trying to do.
And I
because
buy that
he's
he's the type of person who did all of this and still doesn't see themselves as a villain of any sorts, but just someone who did what they had to do, because, you know, these people were going to die eventually, and, you know, at the end of the day, you're just trying to redirect the world somewhere where it's needed, you know?
And it's not even that, because King is a rich man already, rich in both money and in respect, right? He's
from, not like, ambitious. Motive, he's already on top.
He doesn't. It doesn't make sense that he needs the money. It purely comes down to what he believes his race deserves. Yeah, and that's what makes it even more disgusting.
And at the very start,
he doesn't need any of it.
At the very start, he even talks about, like, he owns the only land that doesn't have any oil in it, and he sees oil as like a resource that's going to eventually dissipate, and the castle that he owns, you know, that's going to keep going, and it's more stable and a better source of money in the end of things. So it's not even like he's looking for something better that he doesn't have. It's something else that's driving him, and that is fucking terrifying, because we understand greed. We know greed is for simple people, hence why the protagonist is greedy.
Look, I mean, also, I should say, look, this is a massive ensemble. This is one that obviously rivals something like Oppenheimer. Big stars show up, you're like, wait, they're in this. Also, but the thing is, much more, this takes a different, obviously you have like a couple big actors in this, but there is far more character actors in this than something like Oppenheimer, I'd say. There is just characters who, like, faces you've never seen before, who just are these characters. There's like too many to count, and also
that it took me a while to recognize because of the great job they were doing. Like, pretty much everyone in this film blends completely into their character. Even some more recognizable faces that appear by like the third or fourth scene that you see them in, you forget that they're like, oh, that big star, and you just see the character. Like, everyone is pretty much just like blending into.
But obviously, they went out of their way to cast, obviously, Native Americans and specifically Osage people and extras as well, and even people who have like no acting credits. There's this guy Everett Waller who really stood out for me. He's the leader. The guy does this big speech when there's all these murders are happening.
He's not a trained actor.
He's not a trained actor at all, and he has this speech, and he's in a few scenes.
He's there a lot.
Paul Red Eagle, and you're like, wow. I was like, his speeches like really gets you, and I'm like, oh my god, this guy's never acted before. He's been in like one other thing, and he's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, because like I was assuming that like they must have cast outside Osage people just to get all of these actors and stuff, because there's really no one in this movie where you're like, oh well, what a terrible fucking job. That's the bad actor. Here. Like I just assumed everyone here was like came from like either theater or like something like that, because like they are incredible. Like everyone plays their part fantastically, and like you said, that specific actor, actor now, I guess, his speech is fucking fantastic. Like the way he talks about it, and like the idea of like this wealth that's come from the outside as a corrupting force of like what was supposed to be just their culture and stuff. Like it's heavy, man. It's a heavy speech for someone who's not an actor. God damn.
But I guess I'll quickly run down a couple of things before we get into spoilers. I just want to give credit to Rodrigo Prieto, who was the cinematographer on both The Irishman and Silence, which he got Oscar nominations for with Scorsese. And once again, I think this film is absolutely beautifully lensed. When we obviously get to Oscar season, I do not think he will win the Oscar for Best Cinematography, but because you get something like Oppenheimer, which it's two big 3-hour films that are paced in very different ways and shot very differently. But I think he has some really striking images, and there's the whole burning of the ranch sequence, which I thought was mesmerizing. Once again, much like Oppenheimer, there's two big auteur filmmakers using fire in really mesmerizing ways on screen. I just thought his cinematography was absolutely beautiful, and I also got to give a credit to Robbie Robertson, whose score was not a score I was kind of expecting going into a film like this. It's very subtle, it's very rustic, it's very Western.
It was a very odd score, a very quiet score.
Quiet score, yeah. And sometimes there's just like a bass line playing for like 10 minutes in the background just to pace the film. It's great.
I was going to say,
but I will add...
Will he get a nomination for that?
I think so too.
I'm more because of the scenario, the situation of it all.
Yes. Yeah, because Robbie Robertson did pass away in August this year, so this is his final score, and I have no doubt he will. This will be the whole film. I know, it's very sad, but right, I guess we'll just jump into scores before we do some spoilery things. So, Gonzalo, what would you give Killers of the Flower Moon?
Well, despite the fact that I'm probably never going to watch this movie again, I'm gonna have to give it a 10 out of 10. Yeah, this movie did something I find very hard, which is tell a real life story in a very nuanced way. And I'm also very mad at the fact that this is a 3.5-hour movie, and at no point can I point to a scene and say, hey, that's redundant, maybe you should cut
No,
that.
You can. There isn't a scene you can take out of this film.
I fucking hate that. That sucks, and I hate that very much. That it made me very annoyed, because like I was like, well, sometimes a director gets so big that they get to do what they want, and maybe no one's cutting their shit, but that should have been taken out. No, you can't take shit out. That's very annoying. So that's a 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Well, what about you, Kyle?
I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was like just genuinely incredible filmmaking. I don't think I'll watch it in a long time. I think I'm going to have to kind of let it sit. It is a 3.5-hour film. There's not many 3.5-hour films I've watched twice.
That's a good point.
Like, I need some time. And I enjoy a lot of aspects of it. Some points of the story I wasn't hugely invested in. Once again, I think because I went in with a different perception of what I was expecting rather than nothing. But yeah, no, it's a movie, and I'm actually quite happy about that.
It's a movie.
It's a good movie.
It's a good movie. Well,
like,
great.
I'm happy it exists. Yes.
You give it all that. I mean, it's a good movie.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite astonishing that at 8 years old, Scorsese still manages to have the energy and the passion and the team behind him to make something that is just... This is a true craftsmanship at their at their height of their powers.
Like,
this is
Lewis, making
unbelievable.
a movie is so fucking hard. Making this fucking movie. Oh my god. Oh my god.
And I think, obviously, look, there has been obviously statements and things like, okay, well, Scorsese is a white man telling this story that is very important to Native American peoples. Yeah. And I think the way he does it is still immensely powerful, and I don't think it's distasteful. I think
very respectful, and given
I think it's very respectful.
Given the fact, the only thing I know about how this movie was made was from the credits, and there seemed to be a lot of involvement of different organizations that are clearly knowledgeable about these things. I'm assuming and I'm hoping that a lot of advice was taken in about the way their culture is represented. There are certain scenes where we get into slightly religious territory. I'm hoping there's very a lot of research gone into that, but if those assumptions are true, I as a white dude who has absolutely no knowledge or right to say any of this, I think it seemed very respectful.
Yes, I agree so too, and I think obviously we'll get to more in spoilers as well, but I think the ending of the film as well is there's a way that the way it's ended actually really solidifies that point of that Scorsese understands that he obviously isn't actually the right guy to tell this story. And I think the way it ends kind of puts a full stop on that. But also I think this is a really, really important American tragedy. And it also, you get this really, recently you've had this really interesting period in Scorsese's life where he's done something with The Wolf of Wall Street, he did Silence, he did The Irishman, and now this. And if you really, obviously excluding Silence, it's more religious and dealing with another part of the world. But when you look at those three films, this is an analysis of the sickness in America. And this is sort of his concluding statement on that, on his final belief in the sort of bloodshed that it was built upon and the corruption and everything wrong with America. And I think this is his final statement. And also, there is a problem in Hollywood where a Native American filmmaker probably would not have been financed, obviously, not on a $200 million budget level to make something like this. And he's managed to get this story out to the wider public and managed to make Apple not put this straight to streaming either, give this a cinematic release to try and get the word out there. And I think after 25 films, this is somehow his most important film he's actually ever made. And I'm also giving it a 10 out of 10. Right, let's jump into spoilers. There's a opinion I want to talk about this, right?
Yes.
And it was kind of jumping on Scorsese not being the right guy to deal with this story. And there has been criticism and point of discussion about making Ernest the main character. And people being like, well, this is a Native American story, why isn't it more from Molly's perspective? Which also I kind of... It's her story as well. It's also that belief where it's like you can't have two lead actors.
She is the protagonist. She's not the one the perspective is being told from, but she is very much the protagonist. This is her story. She is the one whose story we're telling. It is her people's story that we're telling, and this movie very much begins with Native Americans and ends with Native Americans. I feel like this decision is a bit more subtle in the sense that, given the fact that this is Martin Scorsese who's directing it and white people who are writing it, I don't think it would have been a good idea to have them write the inner thoughts and feelings of a Native American and their perspective of this situation. I think that would have been very misguided. I think a Native American should be could be very good at writing what a Native American would be feeling, from all of this, specifically in Osage, someone who knows their history, understands their culture. It would be great to see their point of view on a story like this. I am very glad that we did not. I am very glad that we got to see her effect through this, and we still empathize with her in a way stronger way than any other character. She is the one that we give a fuck about. She's the one that everyone's rooting for her to survive this movie and to thrive and to get out of the situation. Her and her family are the victims of everything, but at no point is she specifically like victimized and turned into the damsel in distress. She's a very much, at least from my point of view, she's very much an active part of this story. Not only that, but it is because of her that everything ends up going the way it does. Like you said, this was like when you talked to Kyle about it, you said this was the story of how the FBI was born. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened without her specifically organizing and going to Washington, D.C. to talk to the President of the United States about what was happening down in Osage County. And it feels like it is her prodding into this that really brings out the story. And it is her tragedy and her, like, who like holds this love towards this man only to be betrayed, because she knows she can't trust anyone, but he is the one person who she still trusts, and that was her mistake. But it's, I don't know, I can understand the criticism, and again, like I can't really like speak for the Osage people and be like, oh no, they're fine with it. But if it's if it's someone like me talking about this and criticizing this, I would say just let the Osage people talk about it. If they think it's okay or they think it's not okay, that seems a bit more important. This
film was obviously given blessing by the Osage community as well. There's probably hundreds cast and crew members as well involved, and Martin Scorsese got really involved with the community and wanted to make sure he wasn't doing anything too distasteful when discussing about this film. Look, obviously, I've read a lot online about it. I've seen there are Native American people who have found problems with the film and looked at it and been, offended by it or really disturbed by it, which of course we can't really speak for them, which is a shame. But also staying on this sort of topic about Ernest as well. And there was who was it on the red carpet again? Was discussing about his conflicting feelings about having
is it the one of the Osage people?
Yes,
the one that he was a speech specialist. I can't remember his
speech
name.
Specialist on the film's name.
Language specialist for the Osage.
Yeah.
Was he in the film? Was he part of the cast?
He was part of the crew, and he was talking about it, and he said he was quite conflicted in it, in the sense that Leonardo DiCaprio, Ernest, was depicted as someone who is capable of love and is sort of humanized in a way. But watching the film, I would have to say I don't necessarily agree with it. I think his character, Ernest, I think believes he loves Molly in his own head. But
doesn't really.
He doesn't understand that isn't love. I think that's made very, very clear, and I think especially in the final scene where obviously Ernest has been poisoning her for God knows how long, giving her morphine mixed with her insulin.
And like the fact that he tells himself he doesn't know what it was, the fact that he lies directly to her face, this is a bad person, and the more that we learn about who he is, the worse, like the less we think of him. Up until
and I think they sort of put the pin in his character at the very end, where she asks him, what did you put in with my in my insulin? And he went, it was just insulin. And he says it with a kind of smirk almost, and then she just gets up and leaves, and it's like, that's it. That was his, maybe a shot, maybe not of redemption, but maybe a chance for her to maybe have the process of forgiveness, and he just proves the exact type of horrible person he really is.
He is such a horrible person through this movie, and I love how he is not evil because he wants evil things. He's evil because he cannot stand by what he does. He cannot stand by who he is. He cannot stand by what he wants. He is completely spineless, like you said. I love that moment where the lawyer, played fantastic by Brendan Fraser, tells him that, like, oh no, like, I want to talk to my client, and like he turns completely on the government. Like instantly. It just takes a little bit of talking down to by his family for him to be completely convinced, and then go and bullshit his wife about the fact that he's been lying this whole time, and he's actually done nothing wrong, and everything's going to be okay, only to do the exact same opposite thing again after the death of his child. And that moment where he's sitting down with his wife talking to her, she's heard all the horrid things that he's responsible for, that he's complicit in, and he says that he's happy that everything's finally off his chest. She asks him, what did you, what were you injecting me with? And he lies again. That moment where he's saying that, he's finally happy that he's told the truth, that he's finally off his chest, that he feels like a new man. And it's such a fucking realistic portrayal of a person like this. We all know someone like this. We've all met someone like this, where they always say, this is the new turn. I'm gonna change. I'm gonna improve. I promise. And then the first chance they get to, they go back down the same path. And I think that's what makes him such an incredible piece of shit. I think the way this movie humanizes him is by showing us that humans can act in this way, not because the movie in any moment tells you, hey, this is a good person, you should empathize with them, I feel like it gets us to follow him, but it never gets us to be on his side.
And it's sort of this is how evil grows and expands, because you have people like Ernest, you have people who have no conviction in their belief and actually don't really believe anything, and they just go along with whatever's been told to them. And we were talking about, this as a sort of a look into the evil in America. Obviously, I mean, his whole character, he's just obsessed with money, and he loves. There's that line where he says to I can't remember if it was Blackie. He says
Blackie,
it to. I think it is Blackie when he goes. He says, I love money almost as much as I love my wife, and it's the complete other way around. And he doesn't really love his wife. He's just deluded into believing he is in love when he's not. And maybe it's also a way to sort of distract himself from his actions, is to keep saying that he loves her.
He keeps lying to himself constantly throughout the movie. He gaslights himself constantly throughout the movie, and it's an incredible look at how someone can do such horrible things and be complicit in such horrible things and still sleep at night. And it's this constant self-gaslighting, this constant. I didn't.
And it's also this is you're watching. If anyone's ever confused about what gaslighting actually means, you're kind of watching in action. You're watching a man gaslight his wife as well.
Himself, his wife, and everyone around him.
Everyone around him. It's truly.
It's quite good.
I keep thinking you're going to speak, and then I jump in. No, what are you going to say there?
No, it's a good movie. It just leaves me speechless.
It's a good movie.
Just makes me do things say, and just leave it at that.
Well, let's jump to the ending, actually, because this is one that's actually had a lot of adoration, right? So we obviously have the final court scene, and then the final sort of interaction between Molly and Ernest, where the relationship's completely done. And then you get a live recording of a radio show, which I looked up, and this did actually happen. This was a live radio broadcast in the 1930s, and this is how most of America actually heard the story, was just through caricatures and a brief... It's a true crime podcast. Which
I was going to say, somehow, is this the first true crime podcast?
No. But it's
I was going to say, given the history of policing and the US, it does not surprise me at all to learn that, because given that this was 1930s, right? It was the beginning of the
1930s. This was told.
So this was during the Great Depression and stuff like that. It's the moment where the idea of policing is being solidified into a thing. Police are a thing. Government does control the police. They are under us. They work for us. Before this, it was quite a nebulous concept. There was a lot of police in big cities, and then there's that one scene where Leo's answering the door and talking to the investigator from the bureau, and he's like, you with the Pinkertons, because a lot of police at this point was just a bunch of thugs that private corporations hired in
or
order
private
to,
eyes.
It was a lot of privatized, like
Private
people with
investors,
money hired people that could punch in order to do security for them in certain ways and stuff. So like it is like that point in time where like the idea of policing is being like, you know, becoming part of like what we understand now as, oh, it's always been this way. The like spreading stories about how the FBI is so successful that they solved this very difficult murder and everything ended up happening and going well thanks to their policing efforts is a very good method of propaganda that I am not surprised that all was used.
Just from, once again, a filmmaking perspective of that scene, it's just, once again, Thelma Schoonmaker, just that editing is so,
it's so
brilliant.
Good.
It's snappy, so it's great. Just this whole burst of energy in the final few minutes of the film. And obviously this is how America truly found out about the story, was just silly actors playing caricatures and then just being like, okay, and that's the end of it. And what that does, also, weirdly enough... Scorsese's just made a massive criticism on true crime podcasts at the end of his film diminishing the gravity of what was going on and how disgusting this racial genocide which happened was happening.
I want to take it one step further
noses.
And say that Martin Scorsese, and by the fact that he's the one that says the last lines in that podcast, he is standing in front of us, the audience, and saying, hey, this is just a movie. This was my best filtered attempt at telling this story, but I am just a dude telling a story, and it's not my story to even tell. No. It feels like he's making a mockery of the film itself and recognizing that he's just a dude with a microphone, and the only reason he's telling us this story is because he was allowed behind the microphone. When other people aren't. So
and I think that's what I watched this in my head.
Dude,
my
the
head
cut
was
from
just
that to the
spinning.
Osage people in the drum circle.
Dancing.
Oh my god, that is such a that got me to cry, man.
And I love it as well because obviously they looked at it and went, okay, right, we're the story's over, and now we kind of need to, you know, the usual biography films, you know, like okay, we need to have words on the screen. Here's what happened next. That's the end. And he went, no, why don't we do something with this? Why don't we do this whole thing? So I'm giving you this scathing indictment on true crime podcasts and true crime anything, which just makes everything purely just for entertainment purposes, and no one actually can humanize with what's going on. He does that, and then he goes, he literally is like, I tried. This was the story. And this is what happened with Molly's
felt
life.
Very Wes Anderson.
And there was no mention of the murders as well. Oh my god.
You know?
Jesus Christ. Really powerful stuff.
It was and amazing. I was like, it was amazing. Reminded me a lot of the ending of BlacKkKlansman with Spike Lee. He did a very similar thing of like pulling back that camera and then cutting to real life footage and stuff, and like being like, "Hey, I'm pulling you back from this story, this fictionalized tale." To this is reality. This is the reality of the situation, and a similar thing happens here, where like we cut to the drum circle, and they're not dressed up. They're not in period clothes. It's just the Osage people right now. Like it's just them. That's the community right now. That's the people who are the descendants, or even the same fucking people who survived this shit. Like that's them. And that I feel like that's a very powerful statement, and I can see in moments like that. Despite again, I am not qualified to give critiques or whether this is an offensive movie or whether the representation is well done or not. But I can see in moments like that that there was care to try to do it well.
Yes, and I mean that's actually a really great final point there, Gonzalo. I will just quickly bring up. I mean, look, this film is not going to turn a profit. 3.5 hour big tragedy. It's currently, although it made 44 million on a worldwide debut, currently it's actually tracking higher than Wolf of Wall Street, which is Martin Scorsese's highest grossing film. If this managed to somehow make $400 million, I guess that would break even. But look, this is more Apple trying to get into the awards game again, having a Scorsese in their library, just like
the
Netflix
investment
has
here
Scorsese in their
is
library.
Exclusively for Apple TV to be like, hey, we won Oscars like Netflix, please buy your subscription.
I don't know what you're talking about. They've already won Oscars with Coda.
They already won Best Picture with Coda, true.
They've already peaked.
Sad. Everybody bought Apple TV so they could watch Coda.
And look, obviously, this is a film which will get nominated for a lot of Oscars. I'm predicting maybe like 12, 13 Oscars for this. I actually don't know if it'll win many though, because
for sure.
I think this will be Oppenheimer's year, and I think a lot of the categories this will be nominated in, that will get nominated in, and that will probably sweep.
I bet you anything Barbie's gonna win a couple of things. Or
Barbie will win production design,
it's
absolutely.
Gonna get a couple of them just,
and obviously, and I looked into it, right, because obviously I was talking about Robert De Niro earlier on. He's now second likely to win the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. He's overtaken Robert Downey Jr. and the number one is still Ryan Gosling. So we'll see how that goes for them. Obviously, Cillian Murphy's still the lead in the lead for Oppenheimer. Lily Gladstone's also in second, just behind Emma Stone. Leonardo DiCaprio is also second. They're all second place, but there's no second place at the Oscars, which is a shame.
Everybody gets the second place Oscar.
Everyone gets the second.
Silver Oscar for everyone.
But yeah, we'll see. I think this will be a very interesting awards season when we get to it. I want to see how this film does, how people react to it, how it will do during that period. Obviously, awards are meaningless. Our verdict, or obviously the only important verdict that matters, is someone's opinion, of course.
Typically, yes. We are the voice of our generation.
But look, I guess
as three white straight men, we have way more diversity here than the Academy does, so we can actually represent a wider group.
One of us is Spanish. That is
true.
Than the Academy. Okay,
that is true. That is true. You know, so like that's.
Well, this review has clearly gone off the rails now, so I will just wrap up there. Thank you, Gonzalo, for joining me.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure.
And thank you, Kyle, as well.
Pleasure as always.
Pleasure. Well, on next week's show, obviously, we're going to be jumping back to spooky season because it is Halloween next Tuesday. And for next week, we're going to be talking about movie monsters, the scariest and best. It's getting right into the spookiness of it all. And we may have some reviews for David Fincher's The Killer, depending on what we get up to this weekend. So, that will wrap up today's show, and we just gave our opinion on Killers of the Flower Moon. But at the end of the day, those were our unwanted opinions. Thank you very much.